anti-government forces. The only exception mainly seems to be Tripoli. That's the capital, of course. We're also getting reports the country's second most important military airport has fallen to protesters. Private jets and civilian aircraft at the Al Banin airport were seen grounded. Military personnel say they've joined the People's Revolution. Well, if true, the takeover is another blow to Gaddafi's regime. With more on the opposition's growing area of control, Jackie Rowland reports now from Benghazi.
The town of AlJazeera lies just 50 kilometers to the west of Tripoli. Now it has become a new front line in the battle between pro and anti-Gaddafi forces. These pictures were shot by journalists brought here by the regime. The idea was to show the outside world that Gaddafi is still in control here. Instead, the reporters found that AlJazeera was in rebel hands, at least for now. The town is surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides are armed with tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown against his opponents has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping North Africa and the Middle East. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the rebellion against his 4-decade rule. In the east of the country, opposition forces are welcoming visitors to what they are calling Free Libya. In the city of Benghazi, there are signs of a return to normal. Banks have reopened here and in the town of Al-Baida, both of which threw off Gaddafi's rule about a week ago.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in the city is being filled. Local committees that are running towns and cities in the east of Libya have rallied behind a new leader, the former justice minister who resigned over the brutal repression.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against a dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
Libya relies on its oil fields. They're the mainstay of its economy. But now production appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, only 1/10 of what it would normally produce, according to the manager. The expatriate workers who used to man the plant have fled to escape the violence. Muammar Gaddafi's options are shrinking. Opposition forces continue to advance towards the capital, and the international community has imposed sanctions which further limit his room for maneuver. But the Libyan leader still shows no sign of being in the mood to surrender. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Benghazi.
Well, the Libyan leader still has some support. Just outside the capital, Gaddafi loyalists took to the streets, waving posters and chanting slogans. Outside the city of AlJazeera in western Libya, there were similar scenes. The city centre is in anti-government hands, but the protesters say pro-Gaddafi forces are preparing to launch a counter-offensive against them. We have some amateur footage, allegedly, of Saif al-Islam, one of al-Gaddafi's sons, rallying supporters in Libya. It's unclear when and where the pictures were taken, but in it, Saif al-Islam tells the people that, quote, enemy forces are spreading rumours that the security forces weren't joining the protesters, that weapons would be provided to people ready to fight for Libya. The US Secretary of State is in Geneva ahead of a UN Human Rights Council meeting on Libya. Hillary Clinton arrived in Switzerland late on Sunday. The United States has been vocal in its condemnation of Gaddafi's regime, calling on the Libyan leader to respect his people's wishes and leave now. Well, Tunisia has a new Prime Minister, Al-Baji Qaid Sebsi. He succeeds Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. There had been renewed street violence in the capital, Tunis, prior to his departure. Nadim Barber now.
A surprise announcement as Tunisia's interim president names a new prime minister.
At this critical moment, in order to maintain our national interest and to ensure that the state is up and running with all its institutions, I requested Mr. Baja Qaid Sebsi to assume the office of Prime Minister, and he thankfully accepted this responsibility.
Al-Baji Qaid al-Sebsi is 84 and a former foreign minister. He served under Tunisia's post-independence leader Habib Bourguiba and under President Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali. His appointment came hours after interim Premier Mohamed Ghannouchi unexpectedly stepped down.
I am not prepared to be the person who takes decisions which result in the loss of life.
The move comes at a tense time for Tunisia. Sunday saw new clashes on the streets of the capital. Officials say at least 5 people have died during street protests since Friday. Mohamed Ghannouchi took over as premier on the 14th of January after President Ben Ali fled to Saudi Arabia following weeks of protests. Critics say that since the Jasmine Revolution there's not been real reform, and Ghannouchi's replacement is unlikely to change that.
He's out of touch, he's out of time, he's belonging other generation. What the Tunisian youth need today, who someone will be able to represent them, who someone will be able to respond to their legitimate demands.
Mohamed Ghannouchi has repeated the government's pledge to hold elections by mid-July. But almost 200 people have been arrested over the weekend. It's not clear how far the new Prime Minister can quell the anger on the streets. Nadeem Barber, AlJazeera.
In Oman, at least 2 people have been killed in clashes between protesters and security forces. 8 others were injured. Police used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. 2,000 people had gathered in the country's industrial centre of Sohar to demand political reform. Oman's ruler quickly offered a new job plan in response to the protests. Sultan Qaboos bin Said ordered his government to find jobs for 50,000 people. And he'll also give every job seeker around $400 a month until they find work. Qaboos will also consider giving more power to the popularly elected Advisory Council. Earlier, AlJazeera's Julie Ghosh spoke to Jackie Spinner, a journalist in Oman who was in Sohar when those clashes took place.
Quiet after the sun has gone down, and what we understand is that a delegation from the government has arrived in Sohar to try to meet with organizers and discuss their demands. But, you know, the situation was very tense throughout most of the day today. It morphed from a demonstration, which is what it started out yesterday, into a riot. Serious clashes between the police and the demonstrators this afternoon.
And tell us more about the demonstrators' demands and the government response to them. They're after jobs, better salaries, and end to corruption?
Yes, that's correct. Many of the university students in Sohar are concerned that when they graduate, they don't have jobs. Even though there are companies in Sohar who are in a position to hire them, they don't think that they're getting enough work. And so that's where a lot of that discontent stems from. Like some of the other countries, a few of the other countries in the region, nobody in Oman is calling for a regime change. Everyone is very satisfied with the Sultan here, but they are concerned about some of the ministers, and they're concerned about jobs and inflation and economic issues that are keeping a lot of people down.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the loyalty to Sultan Qaboos. He has made some announcements, hasn't he, about an increase in monthly allowances for students. Has that gone down well or not had an effect?
Well, it was just announced this morning, so I don't know if many of the protesters in Sohar even had time to digest that news. But he has been very responsive. There was a big demonstration in the capital here in Muscat last week, and immediately following that, he announced some of the concessions. So he appears to most Omanis to be dealing with the situation in a very proactive way.
Well, back to Libya now, and the advance of opposition forces there as more cities come under their control. The ring around Muammar al-Gaddafi appears to be tightening. So just what are the options for the embattled Libyan leader? Lawrence Lee reports.
So what next for Gaddafi? Assuming he will not go voluntarily, his next moves must surely be predicated on where he believes he still has support and to what extent he can block his opponents from marching against him. A look at Western Libya presents problems for both the opposition fighters and for Gaddafi. The coastal road from the east is blocked at Sirte, Gaddafi's hometown, which he still controls. It's not a big place, but the roads either side of it are said to be controlled by armed forces loyal to Gaddafi. As such, it presents the biggest obstacle to forces from the east moving on Tripoli. Yet west of Sirte and still east of Tripoli, The rebels are said to now hold Misurata. The town has been the scene of days of heavy fighting, with the city falling and then being counter-attacked by pro-Gaddafi forces. But he now seems to have lost the army and therefore the town. Just as significant is the town of AlJazeera, just west of Tripoli. Geographically, it's crucial. Latest reports from the town of 200,000 say after days of heavy fighting, the rebels are in charge in the centre, but the pro-Gaddafi forces are surrounding it. It's hardly surprising Gaddafi wants it back. If the rebels do keep control, it would leave Tripoli in a pincer. So what of the situation in the capital? The most recent images from foreign media invited by the Gaddafis suggest hasty attempts to clean up the centre and an area around Gaddafi's stronghold still said to be under his control. But contrary to Gaddafi's claims, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that Tripoli is not stable, and some reports have suggested dozens killed in clashes. Scenes from some of the poor suburbs like Tajora in eastern Tripoli seem to suggest the police have simply melted away. It all lends weight to reports from Tripoli that Gaddafi's forces have been trying to pay local men to take up arms against the insurgency. There's no question the ground upon which Gaddafi built his empire is slipping away. His military options look increasingly limited. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Now that the initial drama of Egypt's revolution is over, a second act is being written. But will the slogans of a popular uprising be lost in the translation of a new constitution? And also ahead, the state of press freedom in Malaysia. How new media regulations are sparking an angry backlash.
Hello again. It certainly is rather cool for many of us in the western parts of the States. If we take a look at the satellite picture, we can see the cloud here all feeding down from Canada, dragging in all that cool air and bringing us a fair amount of snow as well. It's going to be another rather unsettled day for many of us as we head through Monday, and still not that warm. San Francisco there only getting to around 13 degrees. It's far milder towards the east. Look at the temperatures here. Atlanta up at 24 degrees, and that's 75 Fahrenheit. All of this rain, though, is pushing its way across us, and behind that it will turn a lot fresher. Now, a bit further south, there's plenty of sunshine for many of us, but not all of us. There are some showers. They crack off over parts of Nicaragua and then push all the way down through parts of Colombia and into Venezuela. Heavy downpours out of that, and at times the showers will be banding together to give some more prolonged outbreaks of rain as well. Over towards Europe, and generally here things are quite quiet, but they're certainly not that warm. Moscow, as a top temperature, will be getting to -12, and in London the temperatures here are tumbling away as well. London this time only getting to around 5 degrees. For the Mediterranean, that's where all the unsettled weather is. Lots of wet weather, strong winds too, and that's also affecting us through parts of Algeria and Tunisia for Monday as well.
It is in the details, a look, a connection, the moments that reveal the truth. Award-winning documentaries from critically acclaimed filmmakers. Witness documentaries to open your eyes. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. Let's recap the top stories here in Al Jazeera now. Fresh fighting has broken out in the Tunisian capital between security forces and demonstrators. The violence comes as Mohammed al-Ghannouchi announced he'll step down as Prime Minister. The UN has unanimously voted to impose immediate sanctions on the Libyan regime. It comes as anti-Gaddafi protesters close in on the Libyan capital. But the Libyan leader remains defiant, saying he won't leave. Well, with the unrest in Libya, the US and Iran briefly found themselves in agreement concerning Gaddafi's actions.